Chapter 8. The journey of the Duke and Sir Ambrose to London had nothing in it to distinguish it from hundreds of other journeys, and they did not meet with a single adventure worthy of being recorded. It happened by one of those singular coincidences in real life which would be called improbable in a novel, that Mr. Montagu's mansion adjoined that of the Duke, Mrs. Montagu having, like most of the parvenu genius, a most violent penchant for the neighborhood of the great, perhaps in hopes that the gentility might be infectious, and that she might catch a little by being near it. Both sides were in the Strand, which was, as we have before stated, in those days the most fashionable part of London, and had both beautiful gardens shelving down to the Thames. Mrs. Montagu received her brother-in-law with all that awkward overstrained civility with which persons raised above their original grade in society gradually endeavor to show their respect to those whom they consider their superiors, whilst Mr. Montagu welcomed him with warm affection, and presented his daughter Clara to her uncle with all the fondness of a parent. Clara Montagu well deserved this partiality, for she was a charming girl, and her light fairy form and animated features seemed to realize all of the poet's fame of Haven. Sir Ambrose was delighted with her, and half his dislike of the mother vanished, and he contemplated the budding charms of his daughter. It was well he had such an antidote, for poor Miss Montagu, in her over-anxiety to render herself agreeable, contrived to be the most excessively annoying to him. Perhaps, indeed, there are a few things more troublesome than this vulgar attempt at politeness, and the good temper of the baronet was almost exhausted ere he retired for the night. Abelard, who had accompanied his master to town, and who often officiated as groom of the chamber, assisted him to undress, and, as usual with servants in those days, took the liberty of giving his opinion freely of their hostess. Sir Ambrose felt no interest in his remarks, but he did not check them, as he hoped. After he had exhausted this theme, he might turn the conversation upon Edric. The baronet was indeed excessively anxious to hear some news of his son, though he was by far too proud to make any inquiries respecting him. "Do you really think Miss Ambrose disagreeable, Abelard?" said Ambrose. "She is a perfect nuisance, your honour, to be all civilized society. Why, I have observed her all day, and I verily believe she has never left your honour for 10 minutes, nor ever ceased for more than half an hour at a time pressing your honour to eat." "True," said Sir Ambrose, laughing. "One would think that she took me for a slave, and wanted to feed me up fat before she sent me to the market to be sold." "Then she is so curious and inquisitive," resumed Abelard. "When she saw me bow to Master Edric just now, she was quite in a fever to know who he was, but I would not satisfy her." "Master Edric?" exclaimed the baronet. "What, then? Have you seen my son?" "Yes, your honour, and it startled me so that it made me raise my the visual organs like one of the Agnus genus when the clouds are charged with electric fluid, and my heart leaped from its transverse position in my diaphragm and seemed to stick like a great bone right against my esophagus." "How did he look?" asked Sir Ambrose. "Not that I feel the slightest anxiety respecting him. No, his own conduct has quite precluded that." "He was in a balloon, and when he saw me, he wrote something on a piece of paper with a pencil and threw it down, desiring me to give it to your honour." "Where is it?" cried Sir Ambrose, endeavouring to conceal his anxiety. Abelard searched his pockets and opened a large pocket-book, which he carefully examined, but in vain. "I'm afraid I have lost it, your honour. No, here it is. Yes, no. There are some verses of my own, and some acromonogrammatic style. Every line that begins with the same word with which the last ended, instead of the same letter. Shall I read them to you, your honour?" Sir Ambrose groaned in his spirits, and the unmerciful Abelard, taking that as a token for assent, deliberately unfolded the paper and read as follows. On love. Of all the powers in heaven above all others triumphs love. Love rules the soul, the heart invades the cities and the shades. The shades form no shelter from its power. Power trembles in its courtly howl. Power the beauty, art thou free? Free thou art not, nor canst thou be. Be every other class released. Released from love thy woes increased by all the weight of care, care flowing from complete despair. Said Sir Ambrose. I hope your honour is pleased with this little effusion of my muse. Oh, yes, it is very fine, Abelard. And your honour thinks it well tuned and well expressed. Excellently, only I don't understand why despair comes in the last line. Despair. Oh, to rhyme with care, your honour. The reason is unanswerable, returned Sir Ambrose, smiling. And so you are quite sure you have lost Edric's note. Not that it is of the least consequence, as nothing he could say can possibly alter my opinion of his conduct. But if you had it, I thought I might as well have to read it to avoid the impunity of obstinacy. It is irrevocably gone, your honour. Well then, good night, and if you should see Edric again, you may as well tell him the fate of his note, for shamefully as he has behaved, I would not give him reason to accuse me of obstinacy. This was the second time the baronet has made some observation, and ill-natured people might have said, but what do the remarks of ill-natured people signify to us? We hope all our readers will be good-natured ones, and as they assuredly put the best possible construction upon Sir Ambrose's conduct, we will not be so malicious as to suggest an evil one. Edric was exceedingly agitated by his encounter with Abelard, and feeling convinced his father was in town, he determined to delay his journey no longer, as his dread of meeting him was excessive. He therefore resolved to seek his tutor, and, if he found him still inclined to procrastinate, to set off without him. On reaching the doctor's chamber, however, he found half his anger converted into laughter at the ludicrous situation of the poor philosopher, who, surrounded as he was on every side by a crowd of tradesmen clamorous for orders, looked something like Mercury encircled by a tribe of discontented ghosts upon the banks of the Styx. Well, Mr. Jones, he said, I see you understand me. The coats are to be those woven-in machines, where the wool is stripped off the sheep's back on one end, and the coat comes completely made on the other, in the newest fashion. Very well, sir, said Mr. Jones, wagging his ears in a token of assent, for in those days of universal education, even the muscles of the head were trained to perform functions which were, in former days, it was only supposed to be possible they might attain. You are quite right, sir. No person of fashion ever wears anything else now. Well, Edric, cried the doctor, I shall be ready to attend to you directly. And so, Mrs. Celestina, you must make the soup, if you please, waterproof. And you, Mr. Crispin, must have the boots ready to dissolve at a moment's notice. Oh dear, what a perplexity I am in. My head is going to just like a steamboat, at the rate of 60 miles an hour. On my word, Doctor, said Edric, looking round in dismay, if we are to take half the things assembled here, I do not know where we shall find a balloon large enough and strong enough to even raise us from the ground. I will show you one, replied the doctor, mysteriously, and solemnly drawing forth from his bosom a key, which appeared to have been suspended by a ribbon from his neck. He slowly opened, and with a great difficulty, the secret drawer of his escritoire, and produced from its inmost recesses a small bottle of Indian rubber. The gravity of the doctor's manner and the length of time that he had employed in his operation had excited Edric's curiosity, and he burst into a violent and uncontrollable fit of laughter when he saw the result. What is the matter, Edric? Asked the doctor with the utmost solemnity. What can be the occasion of this unceremonious and ill-timed levity? Parturian mountains, my dear doctor, replied Edric, still laughing. You know the rest. Ridicule, Edric, said the doctor gravely, is by no means the test of truth. Fools often, nay, generally, laugh at what they cannot understand, and when I shall have explained the motives of my conduct, I trust you will feel ashamed of your present weak and unreasonable mirth. Calculus, Edric, is a substance capable of astonishing dilatation and contraction, whilst the particular elasticity and tenacity of its fibers give it a strength and solidity, very rare in bodies when in a state of extreme tension. There are several very extraordinary phenomena relating to elastic bodies, which I am happy to have the apposite opportunity to explaining to you. Edric yawned. You know, elastic substances have the power of worldly resisting a force which would annihilate solids, apparently infinitely stronger than themselves, as a featherbed will repulse a cannonball that would penetrate with ease through a thick table. Now the reason for this is clear. The elastic body has the power of summoning all its forces to its assistance, for the effect of a blow may be traced even to its remotest extremity, whereas a solid substance can only oppose its enemy by the mere resistance of the identical part struck. Certainly, said Edric, striving to suppress a yawn. Nothing can be more clear. Nothing, resumed the doctor. I was sure you would admire the force of my reasoning. Indeed, I see an excess of your admiration in the involuntary yawns in which you have been indulging. On some occasions, Edric, man shakes off the artificial restraints of society and breaks forth into the full freedom of honest and unsophisticated nature. Thus it was with you, Edric. In ancient times, the extension of the jaws was held synonymous with the extreme understanding, and the opening of the mouth and eyes was considered as the greatest possible sign of pleasure that could be given. In the works of the ancient author, whose poetry was doubtless once esteemed very fine, since it was now quite unintelligible, we find the following passage. And Hodge stood lost in the wide-mouthed speculation. Again, his eyes and mouth the hero opened wide, and divers others, which we will leave till a more convenient opportunity, if you please, said Edric, interrupting him. At present, do favor me for 5 minutes with your attention. We cannot all tell these things. Why not? Asked the doctor, gazing at his pupil with surprise. For my part, I do not think we can dispense with a single article. These cloaks, said Edric, and those hampers, for instance, cannot be of the slightest use. I beg your pardon, returned the doctor. Those cloaks are asbestos and will be necessary to protect us from ignition if we should encounter any electricity in the clouds. And the hampers are filled with elastic plugs for our ears and noses, and tubes and barrels of common air for us to breathe when we get beyond the atmosphere of the earth. But what occasion shall we have to go beyond it? How can we do otherwise? Surely you don't mean to travel with the whole distance in the balloon. I thought, of course, we would adopt the present fashionable mode of traveling, and after mounting the 17 miles or hereabouts, which is necessary to get clear of a mundane attraction, to wait there till the turning of the globe should bring Egypt sufficiently under our feet. But it's not in the same latitude. True, I did not think of that. Well, then, sighing deeply, I suppose we must just do without the hamper. Certainly, and without those boxes and bottles, too, I hope. Oh, no, we can't do without those. Those bottles contain my magic elixir that cures all diseases merely by the smell. A new idea, then. You know, it has been long discovered that the whole materia medicina might be carried in a ring, and that all the instruments of surgery might be carried and compressed into a walking stick. But the idea of sniffing health into a pinch of snuff is, I flatter myself, exclusively my own. Very likely, but we cannot be encumbered with your panacea of aerial tour. Then that box contains my portable galvanic battery. That's my apparatus for making and collecting inflammable air, and that's my machine for producing and concentrating the quicksilver vapor, which is to serve as a propelling power to urge us onwards, in the place of steam. And these bladders are filled with laughing gas, for the sole purpose of keeping up our spirits. The first three will be useful, said Edric, but I positively have no more. I do, then, my precious treasures, exclaimed the doctor, looking sorrowfully around. Dear offspring of my cares, children of my mind, and I must leave you to some rude hand, which, heedless of your inestimable worth, may scatter your beauties to the wind. Alas, alas! Breakfast is ready, and my lord isn't waiting, interrupted the shrill voice of one of Lord Gustavus's servants. Then we must go, said the doctor, and the rest of the pathetic lamentations remained forever buried in his bosom. Lord Gustavus was already seated when they entered the room with two gentlemen, who introduced themselves to the travellers as Lord Noodle and Lord Doodle. These noble lords were both councillors of state as well as their illustrious host, and had attained that high honour in exactly the same way, viz. They had both succeeded their respective fathers. It is not easy to be very diffuse with their descriptions, as they were members of that honourable and numerous fraternity who never take the trouble for judging for themselves, but contentedly swim with the stream, whichever way it may flow, and have nothing about them to distinguish them in the slightest degree from the crowd. Lord Gustavus was at present their leading star, and they might very appropriately be termed as satellites. Thus, when any new idea was started, they cautiously refrained from giving an opinion until they found what he thought of it. They would then look wise, shake their heads, and say exactly so and certainly. Nobody can doubt it, or some of those other convenient Ripneo phrases, which fill up so agreeable the pauses of conversation without requiring any troublesome exertion of the mental powers of either the hearer or the speaker. These gentlemen had now visited Lord Gustavus for the purpose of accompanying him and Edric to the Queen's levee, and as soon as they were taken breakfast, the whole party, with the exception of Dr. Entwerfen, proceeded to court. When arrived there, however, they found the Queen had not yet risen. Her Majesty is late this morning, observed Lord Mayworth, a gentleman loaded with orders and decorations, addressing Lord Gustavus. I am not surprised, said his lordship, for her most gracious Majesty told me the other day that she has slept badly for some time. Of course, caused the great grief, said Dr. Hardman, a little satirical-looking gentleman in a bob wig. Thinking as I think, said Lord Gustavus gravely, I am sure that everyone here must think, and at least ought to think, Her Majesty's want of sleep is a circumstance of a very serious importance. Oh, very well, exploded Lord Noodle, shaking his head. Most assuredly, cried Lord Doodle, shaking his. Aye, demanded the doctor. What possible consequence can it be to her subjects, whether Her Majesty sleeps soundly or has its nightmare? Of the greatest importance, replied Lord Gustavus solemnly. And nothing can be greater, echoed his satellites. Oh, observed Lord Mayworth, for my part I am such a traitor as to think we might exist, even if the Queen did not sleep at all. Or if she slept forever, replied the doctor significantly. Oh, fie, cried Lord Gustavus. What would become of us if this great sun of the political hemisphere were to set? We must watch the rising of another, I suppose, said Lord Mayworth. Yes, continued Dr. Hardman, and then the energies of the people would be roused. They want awakening from their present slumber. They have slept too long under the paralyzing effects of tyranny. The government wants reform. Corruption is eaten into its root, and it would be eradicated ere England can be free, or its people happy. Would to heaven I might live to aid the glorious struggle, that I might see the people assert their rights, and the feigned despotism sink beneath their blows. I've ever admired, said Lord Mayworth, the high integrity and fine principles of the worthy doctor, which have not only obtained for him the applause of England, but the admiration of Europe. The courage, wisdom, and purity of his mind cannot be too highly extolled, and all who know him concur in calling him to the firm a devoted friend of mankind. I also have been a humble supporter of the plans of economy and retrenchment, and it was I who had the honor of suggesting to the council the other day that a humble petition should be presented to Her Majesty, requesting her respectively to order a diminution of lights in her salon, proving incontestably that there were at least 6 more than were absolutely necessary. Thinking as I think, and as I am sure everyone here must think, began Lord Gustavus, but ere he had time to finish his explanation, the folding doors at the back of the audience chamber were thrown open, and the Queen appeared, sitting upon a gorgeous throne and surrounded by the officers of her household, all splendidly attired. The usual ceremonies then took place. Claudia smiled graciously on Edric, and she kissed his hand, and inquired when he intended to depart. Edric informed her on the morrow, when sending to express regret, and desiring to see him on his return, she wished him an agreeable voyage, and dismissed him. During the ride home, Lord Gustavus could talk of nothing but the graciousness of the Queen, upon which he was still expatiating when the balloon stopped. And Edric, who, though he felt grateful for her kindness, was annoyed by hearing so much said of it, hastened to leave him as soon as he possibly could with propriety. On his road to his own apartment, however, he heard a strange and fearful noise, like the voice of someone screaming in agony and rage and pain, which seemed to proceed from the chamber appropriated by his learned tutor, and he was going there to ascertain the cause, when the agitated form of the unfortunate philosopher burst upon him. Sad indeed was the condition in which the splendid ornament of the 22nd century was now presented itself before the eyes of his astonished pupil. His face glowed like fire, his hat was off, and the water streamed from every part of his body till he looked like the effigy of a water deity in a fountain. "Here is management!" he cried, as soon as his rage permitted him to speak. "Here is treatment for one devoted to the service of mankind! But I will be revenged, and centuries yet to come shall tremble at my wrath!" In this manner he continued, and being much too occupied with these awful denunciations to be able to give any information as to what calamity had brought him into this unseemly plight, it will be necessary to go back a little to explain it fully. When Dr. Entwerfen left his breakfast room with Lord Gustavus, which he did not do till a considerable time after the rest of the party had quitted, he was so absorbed in meditation that he did not know exactly which way he was going, and happening unfortunately to turn to the right when he should have gone to the left, to his infinite surprise he found himself in the kitchen instead of his own study. Absent as the doctor was, however, his attention was soon roused by the scene before him. Being, like many of his learned brotherhood, somewhat to the gourmand, his indignation was violently excited by finding the cook comfortably asleep on a sofa on one side of the room, whilst the meat intended for dinner, a meal it was then fashioned to take about noon, was as comfortably resting itself on toils in the other. The chemical substitute for fire, which ought to have cooked it, having gone out, the cook's nap precluding all reasonable expectation of its re-illumination, the doctor's wrath was kindled, though the fire was not, and in a violent rage he seized the gentle Celestina's shoulder and shook her till she woke. "Where am I?" exclaimed she with open eyes. "Anywhere but where you ought to be," said the doctor in a fury. "Look, hussy, look at that fine joint of meat, lying cold and sodden in its own steam." "Dear me," returned Celestina, yawning, "I'm really quite unfortunate today. An unlucky accident has already occurred to the leg of mutton which has formed part of today's aliments, and now this piece of beef is also destroyed. I'm afraid there will be nothing for dinner but some malicious saffron vegetables, and they, most probably, will be boiled into a viscous consistency." "And what excuse can you offer for all this?" exclaimed the doctor, with voice trembling in passion. "It was unavoidable," replied Celestina coolly. "Whilst I was copying a cast from the Apollo Belvedere this morning, having unguarded applied too much choleric to the vessel containing the leg of mutton, the precious fluid in which was immersed evaporated, and viand became completely calcinized, whilst the other affair—" "Hush, hush!" interrupted the doctor. "I cannot bear to hear you mention it. Oh, surely Job himself never suffered such a trial of his patience. In fact, his troubles were scarcely worth mentioning, for the is never cursed with learned servants. Saying this, the doctor retired, lamenting his hard fate in not having been born with those Helicon days when cooks drew nothing but their poultry, whilst the gentle Celestina breast panted with indignation at his complaint. An opportunity soon offered for revenge, and seeing the doctor's steam valet ready to be carried to his master's chambers, she treacherously applied a double portion of caloric, in consequence of which the machine burst while in the act of brushing the doctor's coat collar, and by discharging the whole of the scalding water contained in his cauldron upon him, reducing him to a melancholy state we have already mentioned. The fear of ridicule attached to this incident in a great measure reconciled the doctor to Edric's project of a speedy departure, and the following morning they bade adieu to Lord Gustavus, and, stepping into their balloon, sailed for Egypt.